Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room buzzed with the aftershock of laughter, the kind that comes easy to men who believe they already know everything worth knowing. Metal chairs scraped concrete, boots thudded, brass casings glinted in the harsh light. Somewhere outside, a storm was rising not in the sky, but in silence. And in the center of it all stood Elena Cross, a woman no one saw. She kept her head low, broom in one hand, collection bin in the other. The scent of gun oil and desert dust hung thick in the air, familiar, grounding. She moved with quiet precision between spent shells and boot prints, each step careful, measured. Around her, the sniper unit packed up for the day, laughter echoing like gunfire. Their rifles gleamed under the Nevada sun, long barrels resting on bipods like sleeping predators. Elena didn't belong here, not to them. At least that's what they thought. To them she was the cleaner, the background hum of an otherwise perfect day at the range. She had no insignia, no commendations, just a faded maintenance uniform, sun-faded and sweat-marked, the kind that told stories of labor without recognition. Behind her, the commanding voice of Master Sergeant Cole Briggs broke through the haze. "This," he said, holding up a Barrett MRAD like a priest offering a relic, "isn't just a rifle, it's a surgical instrument." His voice carried easily across the firing line, full of pride and performance. Soldiers turned, their faces painted with respect and awe. The way they looked at that rifle, Elena thought, you'd think it could breathe. "At 1,500 meters," Briggs continued, "it doesn't just hit, it erases." The words rolled like scripture. He paced slowly, gesturing with the rifle as though carving his name into the air. Elena's eyes lifted just for a second. That rifle, she knew it. Not by model but by feel. The weight, the balance. It reminded her of another life, another range, one far from here. But she said nothing. "Now don't get ideas," Briggs said with a smirk, scanning the fresh-faced recruits who hung on every word. "Takes years of training, natural talent, iron nerves. That's what separates a sniper from everyone else." Laughter murmured through the group. Elena's hand paused mid-motion. Her fingertips brushed against a warm casing, still faintly hot from the last shot. For a moment, the sound of the range blurred, replaced by the whisper of wind across Arizona cliffs, her uncle's voice calm beside her. "The rifle doesn't care who's holding it, Lena. The bullet only listens to physics." Back then she'd been a kid perched on the red rock of Black Ridge Plateau, learning to read mirage lines and measure breath. No range markers, no fancy scopes, just desert air, instinct, and trust. That lesson never left her, but here it meant nothing. Here she was invisible. Master Sergeant Briggs kept talking, his words sharp and certain. "Beyond 2,000 meters, he said, puffing his chest. "That's more luck than skill. Don't let anyone tell you different." A ripple of laughter followed, obedient, rehearsed. And still Elena stayed quiet. But silence has its own weight. It draws eyes eventually. "Hey, Cross," Briggs suddenly called out, voice slicing the air. "You've been sneaking peeks at our sessions, haven't you? Ever fired anything bigger than a 9mm service pistol?" Heads turned, the laughter grew teeth. Elena froze, her hand stilling over the collection bin. Her heart didn't race. Not yet. She just straightened slowly, dust streaking her cheek, eyes calm but sharp. "I've done some shooting, Master Sergeant," she said evenly. "Some shooting," Briggs repeated, drawing it out like a joke waiting to happen. "Oh, hear that, boys. She's done some shooting." The squad erupted, mock applause, whistles, grins. And for a moment, she could have melted back into the background, and no one would have remembered her name. But fate has a way of singling out the quiet. "Tell you what," Briggs said finally, tapping the side of the Barrett with a smirk. "Let's make it interesting. We'll set a target at 1,000 meters. Child's play. You get one shot with my rifle. Hit the plate, I'll put your name forward for sniper school. Miss, and maybe you should stick to cleaning up after the real soldiers." The crowd leaned in, half in laughter, half in anticipation, the kind of tension that tastes like salt and pride. Elena's breath stayed calm. Her voice didn't tremble. "I appreciate the offer, Master Sergeant," she said, "but I have duties to finish." That should have been the end of it. But pride rarely leaves well enough alone. "Oh, come on," someone shouted, Private Harris, the loudest of them all. "It's just for fun." "Yeah," Briggs said, grinning like a wolf who smelled blood. "Don't be shy." He turned, scanning the desert horizon until his eyes caught on a distant ridge. "Actually," he said, lowering the scope with exaggerated calm, "let's make it educational. Iron Veil Ridge, 4,000 meters out. You hit that cross, I'll eat my words. Hell, I'll write your commendation myself." The group fell quiet. Even Harris shifted uncomfortably. 4,000 meters. That wasn't ambition, that was absurd. Briggs knew it. Everyone did. It was a taunt designed to fail a punchline before the joke. And then something in Elena's posture changed. She didn't speak immediately. She just set her bucket down and started walking toward the rifles. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't ego, it was peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you've already decided who you are. The laughter dimmed, the air seemed to tighten. Briggs blinked. "What rifle would I be using?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "My Barrett MRAD, 375 Che TAC." He waited for her to back down. She didn't. "What's the ballistic coefficient of your ammo?" she asked. Silence, real silence. The kind that presses against the skin. Briggs blinked again. That wasn't a casual question. .670, he said at last. 300 grain Sierra Match King. Elena nodded once, calculating. Muzzle velocity. 2650, his voice faltered. "Why?" She didn't answer. She just turned her eyes to the nearest range flag, the fabric flickering in the desert wind. Wet her finger, tested the air. Then she pulled a cracked ballistic PDA from her pocket, old, dusty, but alive. Numbers flickered across the screen as she typed. Temperature, humidity, wind direction, mirage distortion. To her it was language. To them it was magic. Harris chuckled nervously. "What is this, the Weather Channel?" She ignored him. The wind whispered, dry and steady. Her eyes narrowed, reading not what was visible but what moved between. Briggs tried to mask his unease. "Where'd you learn to do that?" "You'd be surprised what you can learn when no one's watching," she said softly. He frowned. Something about her tone, calm, certain, unsettled him. When she finally looked through the scope, it was like slipping into an old memory. The desert shimmered. Heat waves rippled like ghosts. And there, at the farthest point of sight, sat the orange disk of a target, barely real against the horizon. Almost 4,000 meters away. She took a slow breath, aligning the crosshairs. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Wind steady at 4 miles per hour here, but not there." Her fingers adjusted the scope, deliberate, methodical. 34 MOA, 10 clicks left, every movement exact. The men watched, caught between disbelief and awe. She wasn't pretending, she was working. Even Briggs couldn't hide his fascination. This wasn't guesswork. This was something else, the quiet rhythm of someone who knew what it meant to trust a shot beyond logic. Elena settled behind the rifle, her body still, her heartbeat slowing. No tension, no wasted breath. "Bones carry the weight," she murmured to herself, "not muscles." The scope's reticle hovered over the mirage-blurred circle of color, almost invisible now. The world seemed to hold its breath. She waited. Not for courage, for calm. Her uncle's voice whispered again in memory. "You don't control the shot, Lena. You align with it. Then you let go." 7 seconds of flight time. 2.5 miles of air. "Now," she whispered. The trigger broke. The sound cracked through the silence, sharp, clean, absolute. Recoil punched her shoulder. Dust leapt along the firing line. And then nothing, just wind and waiting. Harris smirked nervously. She missed has to be. But Briggs didn't answer. His eye stayed glued to the spotting scope, searching, trembling slightly. Seconds stretched, heavy, infinite. Then across the desert, a faint crack echoed back. Impact. Delayed, distant. Real. Briggs froze, his jaw slackened. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Dead center. The range fell silent. No laughter. No sound. Just the slow rise of disbelief, breaking into awe. Elena rose quietly from the rifle, brushing sand from her knees. Her face was calm, composed. Not proud, just still. I figured actions would speak louder than words, she said softly. Briggs kept staring through the scope, shaking his head as if trying to rewrite what he'd seen. A near 4,000-meter shot, with a borrowed rifle, in shifting desert wind. Impossible. And yet there it was. He lowered the scope slowly, voice rough. Cross. She turned, meeting his eyes with quiet steadiness. I owe you an apology, he said. Her expression softened, not with victory but understanding. It's fine, Master Sergeant, she said. I understand why you made assumptions. He shook his head. No, it's not fine. We're supposed to recognize skill no matter where it hides. And for the first time, his voice wasn't commanding. It was humble. Elena only smiled faintly. Sometimes, Master Sergeant, she said, respect doesn't speak, it listens. The wind carried her words across the range, soft and unhurried. And somewhere, deep inside every man who had laughed that morning, something shifted. They had seen skill, but what they had really witnessed was grace. How fast can a secret turn into legend? It started as whispers on the wind carried from one barracks to another, retold with shaky hands and wider eyes each time. By sundown, it had become gospel. The cleaner, the woman with the broom, had hit a target nearly 2.5 miles away. No one had believed it until the video surfaced. Someone, probably Collins, had filmed the shot on his phone. The footage was grainy, heat shimmered, but it didn't matter. You could see her posture, the recoil, the stillness, and then the delayed, distant puff of dust where the bullet struck. Dead center. The sound hit 6 seconds later, faint, like a heartbeat that had traveled across time. By evening, the clip was everywhere on the base. Instructors huddled around screens. Technicians replayed it in disbelief. Some called it luck, others called it physics, but everyone agreed on one thing: that wasn't something you could fake. And in the middle of that storm of awe and speculation, Elena Cross kept her silence. She didn't join the cafeteria chatter or listen to the theories. She just walked her usual route down the maintenance corridor, pushing her cart, the same steady rhythm as always. But she could feel the eyes now. The same faces that once passed her without notice now paused mid-conversation when she entered a room. Their tone shifted. Their posture softened. It was subtle but unmistakable. Respect doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it tiptoes in, unsure if it's too late. At the far end of the corridor, Master Sergeant Briggs waited. Not the booming instructor from the range, but a man who'd been forced to look at himself differently. His cap was off, his expression unreadable. Elena, he said quietly, falling into step beside her. I filed it. She frowned slightly. Filed what? The commendation, he said. And a request for review. You deserve recognition. That shot. She stopped walking. Wasn't supposed to prove anything, Master Sergeant, she said softly. It was just what needed to be done. Briggs nodded slowly. I know, but sometimes what we don't mean to prove ends up changing everything. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. There was something fragile about the silence between them, the kind that carried both apology and gratitude. Later that night, in the small, quiet dorm she shared with 2 other maintenance workers, Elena sat by her bunk, cleaning her hands with a rag. Gunpowder residue still clung beneath her nails. She didn't even realize it until she saw it under the dim light. It made her pause. The smell, the texture, it all came rushing back. Her uncle's voice again, older now, softer. "There's no such thing as an impossible shot, Lena. Just a shot you're not ready for yet." She had been ready, not for pride but for peace. Still, that peace came with an ache she couldn't name. Being seen was a strange thing when you'd lived invisible for so long. The next morning, the air around the base was different, sharper, curious. She could feel the change before she even reached the range, the way conversations dipped when she passed, the way glances lingered a little too long. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was something heavier. Expectation. Briggs met her at the gate, clipboard under his arm. "Command wants to talk to you," he said simply. Her pulse quickened, not out of fear, but out of unease. Recognition had never been her goal. She had lived her life in the spaces between acknowledgement, working, observing, learning without needing applause. Now the spotlight felt wrong. "Command?" she asked. He nodded. Colonel Price himself. He saw the footage. Elena blinked. The name carried weight across Ravenwood. Colonel Nathan Price, the man who built the base's sniper training program from the ground up, a legend in his own right. And now he wanted to see her. The walk to headquarters felt longer than usual. Every hallway seemed brighter, every reflection in the polished floor sharper. Inside, the colonel waited, a tall man with weathered skin and steady eyes that saw too much. He stood behind his desk, the video paused on his monitor. Elena could see herself frozen mid-recoil, hair blown by the shockwave, eyes steady behind the scope. "Miss Cross," he said, voice even. "That was some impressive marksmanship." Elena kept her tone measured. "Thank you, sir." "I'll admit," he continued, folding his arms, "at first I thought it was a stunt, something Briggs cooked up for morale." His gaze softened slightly. "Then I ran the telemetry, distance confirmed, conditions accounted for, and that, well, that wasn't a stunt. That was science married to instinct." He leaned forward, studying her face. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" She hesitated, not out of secrecy but memory. "Black Ridge Plateau, sir. My uncle taught me. He used to say the wind's just another kind of language." The colonel nodded slowly. "Wise man." He clicked the screen, zooming in on the target impact. "You understand what this means, right?" "I understand I'll need to go back to work," she said quietly. That made him smile, faint but genuine. "You remind me of someone I trained with years ago. Same look in her eyes, same quiet backbone." He stepped around the desk and extended a small folder. "Advanced Sniper School Application. You're being recommended officially. It's your choice." Elena's hand stayed still. Her eyes fell on the folder but didn't touch it. "Sir," she said, "I didn't take that shot to earn a place. I took it because someone needed to learn that worth isn't printed on a badge." "Maybe," Price said softly, "but that's exactly the kind of person who should be there." He didn't pressure her, just left the folder on the desk and walked to the window. The desert stretched endless and silent outside, the range glinting in the sun. "The truth is," he said, "the best snipers I ever knew weren't the loudest. They were the ones who listened before they spoke." Elena's fingers brushed the folder. The paper felt heavier than it looked. A path she hadn't expected, now waiting for her. But before she could answer, the colonel turned slightly. "Think about it," he said, "and whatever you decide, that shot will still stand." She nodded once quietly and left. Outside, the wind was rising again. She stopped at the edge of the range, where the world had shifted for her only a day before. The target on Iron Vale Ridge was still there, a speck of orange nearly lost to the horizon. Someone had repainted it already, bright and clean. But her shot mark, the perfect crater at its center, remained untouched. She crouched, fingertips brushing the dust. It was strange, she thought, how everything could look exactly the same, and yet nothing be the same at all. Behind her, footsteps approached. Briggs again. "Never thought I'd be jealous of a janitor," he said, half laughing. But there was no mockery this time, just humility. "You realize you made half the instructors look bad, right?" "I didn't make anyone look bad," she said gently. "People do that themselves when they underestimate others." He nodded, fair. Then after a pause, "You're gonna take it, right, the school?" Elena looked out at the ridge again. "I haven't decided." "Why not?" "Because I don't know if I want to become what they expect me to be now," she said softly. "Sometimes being unseen is safer." Briggs frowned. Safer maybe, but not truer. Those words lingered long after he walked away. That night sleep refused to come. The wind howled against the thin dorm window. Elena sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at the folded application on her lap. Her uncle's voice came again. "The rifle doesn't care who's holding it." But maybe, she thought, it wasn't about the rifle anymore. Maybe it was about what happens after you've proven yourself. Would she become another story told in barracks for years? Or could she quietly reshape the way soldiers saw the unseen, the way respect was given, not earned through arrogance but through grace? The clock ticked softly. Midnight. She finally rose, walked to her small desk and opened the folder. Her signature was quick, steady, uncertain only for a second. In the weeks that followed, the routine shifted. Maintenance duties gave way to marksmanship drills. Briggs became her spotter during pre-tests, something he volunteered for. She didn't ask why, but she suspected it wasn't duty. It was redemption. Word spread further across bases, forums, even whispers in sniper circles. The cleaner from Ravenwood. The woman who hit 4,000. It became a legend no one could quite verify, and no one could dismiss. Through it all, Elena kept her silence. She didn't chase the story. She didn't correct it. She just prepared, quietly, patiently, like she always had. Because the truth, she realized, wasn't about one shot. It was about being ready, always, for the moment the world decides to look your way. And when that moment came, she intended to be steady enough not to flinch. Why did walking through the gates feel heavier this time? Ravenwood's desert training complex had always looked the same, endless horizon, cracked ground, heat rising in silver waves. But now, standing under the metal arch stamped Advanced Marksmanship Division, Elena Cross felt something new stirring beneath her calm. Not fear, not pride. Something quieter. Expectation. The whispers followed her here too. That's her. The cleaner. The 4,000-meter shot. Even the instructors she passed, men and women with tabs, medals, and hardened eyes, paused a fraction longer than necessary. She signed in, received her tag, and reported to the firing line. Group Bravo 3. 8 candidates. 7 of them already carried sniper insignias. She was the only one without rank, the only one whose name was written in pencil, not ink. When the instructor arrived, his voice snapped across the heat like a whip. "Welcome to the edge of patience, Bravo 3. My name's Chief Warrant Hale. You'll learn that bullets don't care about excuses. Neither do I." He paced like a wolf. His eyes swept across the group, stopping briefly on Elena. "Your cross," he said. "The civilian recommendation, Briggs' miracle shot." The others shifted, trying not to stare. Elena just nodded. "Yes, sir." "Miracles don't impress me," Hale said flatly. "Consistency does. You get one wind call wrong, one breath mistimed, and your legend means nothing." She didn't argue. Legends were never her intention. Only truth. The first exercise was wind reading at long distance, 1,200 meters, then 1,600, then 2,000. Each candidate was assigned a different rifle system, different ammo, different conditions. Hale's rule was simple: no spotters, no corrections, one shot each. Elena adjusted her scope. The wind flags rippled unevenly, stronger crosswinds at mid-range, subtle eddies along the ridgeline. Most shooters overcompensated in such cases. They saw the movement but didn't feel it. She knelt, slowed her breath, watched dust patterns roll like smoke. Then she whispered the wind's rhythm to herself, not as numbers, as language. The shot cracked. Impact half an inch left of center. Hale said nothing. He just glanced at his data board and wrote confirmed hit. By the time the day ended, her results spoke for themselves. She didn't miss once. Still, no one spoke to her. At dinner, the mess hall hummed with talk. Laughter rolled down the long tables, bouncing between cups and trays. But around Elena's seat, there was only quiet. Her presence made them uneasy, not because she was weak, but because she wasn't supposed to exist in their world. Across from her sat Corporal Nia Torres, the only other woman in Bravo 3, sharp-eyed and stone-faced. She studied Elena for a while before speaking. "You really hit 4,000. Elena didn't look up from her tray. "That's what they say." "That's not an answer." Elena finally met her gaze. "Neither is the question." Torres smirked faintly. "Fair." She leaned back. "They think you're here because of luck, but I've seen luck. It doesn't group at Submoa. You've got skill, just not pedigree." "I don't need pedigree," Elena said softly. "Just opportunity." Torres nodded once, an unspoken truce between them. Respect born of observation, not rumor. The following weeks were a blur of precision and punishment. Sleep became a privilege, comfort a memory. Hale pushed them until the desert itself felt like an adversary: wind, glare, dehydration, mirage. It wasn't about marksmanship anymore. It was about endurance. During one exercise, tracking and counter-sniping, the candidates had to locate a hidden instructor across several kilometers of broken terrain. Most relied on optics. Elena relied on instinct. She lay flat, cheek pressed to the rifle, eyes half closed. The mirage shimmered, tricking perception. But sound carried differently through heat, low, stretched, fractured. She heard it, the faintest mechanical click in the distance, like a breath caught in steel. Her rifle shifted 1 degree right. She didn't overthink. She simply trusted the math that lived in her bones. Shot fired. Dust plume. Then a voice through comms. Cross target neutralized. Hale's tone was unreadable. First to confirm, "Well done." Still there were no smiles. Just more data, more drills, more quiet. By the 4th week, fatigue clawed at everyone. Sleep deprivation tests, breath control drills, shooting through changing temperature gradients. The kind of scenarios that broke focus more than muscle. And yet through all of it, Elena remained still. It wasn't arrogance. It was something deeper, a kind of peace that came from living years unseen. When no one expects you to shine, you learn to burn quietly. One evening, while others cleaned their rifles and swapped stories, Hale approached her alone. His face was set, unreadable, but there was curiosity in his eyes. "You've done this before," he said. Elena looked up. "Done what, sir?" "Watch people underestimate you," he said simply. She smiled faintly. "Everyone's good at something." He chuckled once. "That they are. You know what your problem is, Cross." She waited. "You don't know if you want to win, or just prove you belong." The words struck harder than he knew. Because deep down he was right. That night she lay awake, the stars sharp above the desert sky. She thought about her uncle, the man who taught her to measure wind by the bend of grass, not by numbers on a device. He once told her, "You'll reach a point where your skill isn't the test, your purpose is." Maybe this was that point. The next morning, Hale's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Final evaluations begin at 600. Prepare for unknown distance engagement." The air around the camp changed, tense, brittle. They all knew this test decided everything. The candidates were loaded into transports before sunrise. The desert stretched endless and colorless, morning light spilling over dunes like molten gold. They stopped near a rocky basin, dotted with scrub and shadow. Targets were placed across miles of terrain, some visible, others hidden behind ridges. Hale gave the briefing. You have 6 shots, unknown distances. Each target hit earns 1 point. Misses earn nothing. No corrections, no spotters. You're alone with your math. He looked at Elena last. Show me if that 4,000-meter story was an accident. When her turn came, she knelt in the dirt, adjusted her rifle and breathed in the silence. Distance was invisible, a number disguised as air. She studied heat shimmer, watched the flags flutter slow, timed her breathing with the shifting gusts. First shot, metallic ping. Second shot, faint echo. Third, dead center. By the fourth, her shoulder ached. The recoil bruised bone, but her eyes never wavered. She whispered calculations between breaths, each word a bridge between logic and instinct. Fifth shot hit. Sixth shot hit. 6 for 6. The silence afterward was heavier than any applause could have been. Even Hale, known for being cold as stone, just stood there, arms folded, expression unreadable. When the results posted later that day, Elena's name sat at the top. But pride didn't reach her. Only a quiet relief, not for victory, but for validation that didn't need words. That evening, Tors found her again by the edge of camp, cleaning her rifle under the fatting sun. You just made history, she said, and you're sitting out here like it's laundry day. Elena smiled. Laundry doesn't get done by itself. Tors sat beside her, silent for a while. Then she said, you know what they're saying now. Hale wants to put you on the experimental long-range division, field deployment. Elena paused mid-motion. Field. Tors nodded. They're testing new scopes, autonomous spotting systems. They want someone who can outthink the tech, not rely on it. Elena's pulse steadied again. The thought of deployment didn't scare her. What scared her was what it meant, that she'd no longer be invisible, that her skill had finally turned into a weapon others wanted to use. Tors leaned forward. You'll take it, won't you? Elena didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the horizon, the same desert that had once made her invisible, now painted in gold and silence. I'll take it, she said softly, but on one condition. Tors raised an eyebrow. What's that? That I never forget where I came from, she said. Because the moment I do, I become exactly what they used to see, a uniform instead of a person. Tors nodded slowly. Then I guess they chose the right one. That night, as the camp lights dimmed, Elena lay awake again, not restless this time, but aware. The future she hadn't asked for was already moving toward her. Missions, operations, tests beyond simulation. But beneath it all, she carried one unshakable truth. Sometimes strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers between breaths, patient, steady, unseen. And when the world finally looks your way, it's not power that defines you. It's grace. What do you do when clarity becomes a burden? Elena Cross had spent months proving that precision wasn't luck. It was patience, discipline, and trust. But none of that training, not the sleepless nights, the bruised shoulders, or the numbers etched into her mind, prepared her for what followed. Deployment. The orders came quiet, sealed, and sudden. Observation mission, Sector Delta 9. No combat directive, just surveillance. At least, that's what the paperwork said. The morning she left, the desert air was sharp with winter wind. She stood on the tarmac beside her duffel, helmet under her arm. Her reflection in the transport's metal hull looked like someone she barely recognized. Uniform pressed, insignia freshly stitched, eyes too calm to belong to a beginner. Briggs approached from behind, clipboard in hand. Long way from picking up casings, huh? He said, a faint grin on his face. She smiled back. Some habits die hard. He nodded toward the aircraft. You'll be paired with Captain Everett, experienced spotter, Don't let his silence fool you, he's watching everything. Sounds familiar, she said. As the engines roared to life, Briggs lowered his voice. Elena, don't lose what got you here. She tilted her head slightly. And what's that exactly? The way you see things, he said, before the rest of us do. She didn't answer. She just gave a small nod and stepped onto the ramp into a sky that seemed too wide for comfort. The forward outpost at Delta 9 wasn't much more than steel containers stacked into living quarters, half-buried sensor arrays, and the constant hum of surveillance drones. Dusk clung to everything, even the light. It was a place built for waiting. Captain Everett was already there when she arrived, lean, middle-aged, calm as stone. His uniform bore no rank display, just sun-faded patches. He extended a hand, cross. Captain. He gestured to the overlook. This is your perch. We watch, we record, we don't act unless ordered. Elena nodded, simple enough. But as she unpacked her gear, she noticed the tension in the air, the kind that doesn't come from boredom, but from too many rules keeping instinct on a leash. Their mission was clear: monitor a valley below, a network of small settlements rumored to harbor enemy movement, identify patterns, confirm logistics routes. No engagement unless fired upon. For the first week, nothing moved but wind and time. Days melted into one another, hot light by day, cold silence by night. Elena adjusted scopes, tracked heat signatures, logged coordinates. But her eyes, they noticed more than data. Children playing in dust, women hanging clothes on lines strung between collapsed walls, men repairing engines under fatting sunlight. Life, ordinary, fragile, stubborn life. Everett saw her hesitation. You'll get used to it, he said quietly, seeing them through glass. She glanced at him. Doesn't it bother you? He didn't look away from the scope. It used to. That answer stayed with her longer than it should have. One evening, just before dusk, a flicker of movement cut across her scope. Two figures at the valley's edge, cloaked, carrying something long and wrapped. Rifles or tools? She couldn't tell. The mirage blurred their outlines, warping distance. She leaned closer, adjusting focus. Captain, you see that? Everett was already on it. Got them, South Ridge, coordinates marked. Through the headset, command crackled. Observe. Do not engage unless clear hostile intent. Elena's finger hovered near the trigger, the weight familiar yet unwanted. Her breath slowed, heartbeat steady. She tracked their movement, precise, controlled, but something felt wrong. They weren't moving tactically. They were walking like men carrying labor, not weapons. Captain, she whispered, those aren't rifles, they're digging tools. Everett frowned, adjusting zoom. The screen sharpened, wooden handles, not barrels. He exhaled, copy that. Command came back. Stand by, confirmed non-combatants, maintain overwatch. Elena lowered the rifle slowly, eyes still locked on the figures as they disappeared into the ridgeline shadows. Relief and unease mixed inside her, relief for restraint, unease for how close she'd come to ending two lives that didn't need to end. That night she couldn't sleep. The desert wind pushed through the cracks of the outpost, whispering through the silence. She sat on the floor, cleaning her rifle piece by piece. Everett's voice came from behind her. Trouble sleeping. She didn't look up. I almost pulled the trigger. He nodded. Everyone almost does. But that's the point, isn't it? She said softly. Almost, the line we never talk about. Everett sat across from her, elbows on knees. You're new, so I'll tell you something most forget. A good sniper isn't measured by how many shots they take, but by how many they don't. Her eyes met his. There was no judgment in them, only understanding. You ever wish you hadn't taken one? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, every single one. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was shared, the kind of silence that understood cost. Weeks passed, the mission shifted, new coordinates, different terrain, higher altitude. Elena grew quieter, her precision sharper. Her reports became reference material for other teams, her wind calls, her distance estimations, her ability to see beyond data. One morning, Everett handed her a sealed envelope. "Orders," he said. "Special assignment. They want you alone this time." "Alone?" He nodded. "Forward observation, Sector Echo 2. You'll be overwatching an extraction, just eyes, no trigger." She hesitated. "And if it changes?" He looked at her carefully. "Then you'll know what to do." That afternoon, she was flown to the new position, a rocky cliff overlooking a narrow valley, wind slicing through her hair like static. Below, a small unit moved through the canyon, Allied operatives retrieving intelligence. Her job, keep them safe from unseen threats. Hours passed, nothing. Then movement. North slope, 3 silhouettes shifting along a ridge, moving with intent, too disciplined for civilians, too careful for wanderers. Elena steadied her rifle, zooming in. They had rifles, scoped, suppressed, positioned for ambush. Her comm crackled, cross status. 3 hostiles, 200 meters above your position. They haven't seen you yet. Can you neutralize? Her throat tightened. She could easily. The wind was steady, the angle perfect. But something inside her resisted, not fear but hesitation. The first rule echoed in her mind. Observe. Do not engage unless confirmed threat. Cross respond. Can you confirm hostile intent? The figures adjusted position. One aimed down toward the Allied team. Sunlight flashed briefly off a scope lens, just enough to answer the question for her. "Confirmed," she said quietly. Her finger rested against the trigger's curve, calm, certain. She inhaled slowly, exhaled half. The rifle kicked. One down. The other scattered, confusion, panic. She adjusted windage, heartbeat syncing with movement. Second shot. Third. Silence. Her breath shook. The canyon lay still again. Command came through. All hostiles neutralized, extraction secure. Good work, Cross. Good work. 2 words that didn't sound like praise. They sounded like weight. When she returned to the outpost, Everett met her outside. "Heard you saved an entire team today," he said. She just nodded. "They were seconds from losing 3 men," he continued. "You did what had to be done." "Maybe," she said softly, "but it never feels that clean." Everett's expression softened. "It's not supposed to. The moment it does, you've lost something you don't get back." That night she walked alone to the observation ridge. The desert below glowed faintly under moonlight, endless, quiet, unjudging. She set the rifle down beside her and sat cross-legged, watching the horizon. In the distance, she could almost see her past self, the woman collecting casings in the heat, invisible among soldiers, the one who only wanted to be seen for her worth. Now she was seen, but the price of clarity was heavier than she'd imagined. She thought of Briggs, of her uncle, of every quiet lesson carved into her hands. The wind shifted softly, brushing against her face. It carried a truth she finally understood. Being precise isn't the same as being right. Sometimes the hardest target isn't the one in your scope, it's the one in your heart. The part that trembles after the echo fades. The part that still hopes the next shot won't be needed. She stayed there until dawn, the horizon bleeding gold. When the first light touched her face, she whispered, almost to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And for the first time since that impossible day on the range, she felt both the weight and the peace of those words. When did recognition start feeling like a burden? By the time Elena Cross returned from Delta Sector, her name had already spread across the comm networks. Not just the name, the story. The woman who made a 4,000-meter shot. the cleaner who became the calmest trigger in the field, the sniper who saw what others missed. At first she tried to ignore it, but silence has a way of amplifying truth. Everywhere she went, whispers trailed behind her boots. In the mess hall, they spoke softer when she passed. In briefings, officers addressed her by last name with a new kind of care, the kind reserved for living proof of impossible things. For everyone else, it was a myth made real. For Elena, it was a shadow growing heavier with every retelling. She didn't want fame. She wanted quiet. But quiet doesn't live long in places that worship precision. The psychologist's office sat at the far end of the base, glass walls, soft light, a small green plant that looked painfully alive against the metal. Elena had been summoned there 2 days after her return. No warning, just a polite order, mandatory post-mission evaluation. She entered, posture straight, uniform pressed. The man behind the desk smiled gently. "Sergeant Cross, I've been looking forward to meeting you." "Sir," she replied, sitting across from him. The seat felt too soft, the room too quiet. "My name's Dr. Keene," he said. "You've had quite the journey these past few months. How are you feeling?" "Functional," she said. He chuckled softly. "That's an efficient answer, but I'm not asking for efficiency. I'm asking for honesty." She folded her hands on her lap. "I'm fine." He nodded, studying her for a long moment. "You know, fine is the most common word I hear in this room, usually right before someone tells me they can't sleep." She said nothing. The silence stretched. Then with a quiet sigh she admitted, "Sometimes I replay it. Not the shot itself, the silence after. It's like the world waits to breathe again." Dr. Keene nodded slowly. "That pause is what gets to most people, not the sound of the trigger, the space that follows. The moment you realize there's no undoing it." Elena's gaze dropped to her hands. The memory of the canyon flickered, the scope, the figures, the sudden stillness after. "I don't regret the choice," she said softly, "but I regret that it was necessary." He leaned back, voice thoughtful. "That's a healthy distinction. Regret and guilt aren't the same, but they share a language." Her eyes lifted. "And what language is that?" "Human," he said simply. For the first time in months, she almost smiled. It was strange how much humanity could hide behind calm. Days turned to weeks again. Ravenwood's command center began requesting her input on training data, ballistics testing, mirage reading, atmospheric drift. Her precision wasn't just being celebrated now, it was being studied. One afternoon, she found herself standing in a research hangar surrounded by prototypes. Drones, rifle stabilizers, digital spotting systems, all built to make shooters more like her. A colonel from the development division walked her through the setup, pride radiating off him. "With your input," he said, "we can teach machines to replicate human intuition." Elena stared at the display. A dozen screens showing wind data, trajectory arcs, impact algorithms. She said quietly, "Machines don't get nervous." "That's the point," the colonel said. "Perfection without hesitation." She looked at him, calm but firm. "Then it's not perfection, it's imitation." He blinked. "Excuse me." "Precision isn't just math," she said. "It's empathy. The wind, the distance, the target, they all have a rhythm. You can't code that." Her tone wasn't angry. It was tired, the kind of tired that comes from realizing what people want from you isn't understanding, but replication. After that, she excused herself, stepping outside into the harsh Nevada sun. The heat pressed down, dry and merciless. For a moment, she let it burn away the noise, the praise, the algorithms, the data. Just sky, just silence, just herself again. That night, she sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at a half-written letter on the small metal desk. It was addressed to no one and everyone at once. "I used to think the hardest thing about being unseen was being forgotten," she wrote. Now I think it's being remembered for the wrong reasons." She paused, pen trembling slightly. "I don't want to be the shot they replay in classrooms. I want to be the quiet before it, the part no one records, the stillness that means the world hasn't broken yet." She folded the letter, slid it into her journal, and closed it carefully. Some truths didn't need to be sent. The following week brought a new order, a reassignment briefing. Elena arrived expecting another field mission. Instead, she found herself in a conference room with two colonels and a major she'd never met. Their expressions were unreadable, their words rehearsed. "Sergeant Cross," one began, "due to your performance record, you're being considered for integration into Joint Task Unit Spectre." The name hung heavy in the air. Spectre, an elite multinational team known for covert overwatch operations. Silent, unseen, uncredited. The kind of unit that didn't exist on paper. Elena's jaw tightened. What would my role be? Long-range overwatch, deep reconnaissance. You operate independently, attached to small teams or remote ops. You'd be their eyes and, when necessary, their reach. "When necessary," she repeated, the words colder than intended. The major leaned forward. "Your skill saves lives, Cross. We need operators who can make the impossible possible." She thought of the canyon, the mirage, the three figures who never came home. "Saving lives isn't the same as taking them," she said quietly. The colonel's tone softened. "No one's asking you to lose your humanity, Sergeant. We're asking you to use it when others can't." The room fell silent for a moment. Then Elena stood. "I'll consider it." They nodded, dismissing her with the same bureaucratic calm as always. But as she walked out, she knew she'd already decided. That evening she found Briggs sitting alone by the range fence, a mug of coffee steaming beside him. The sky was melting into twilight, the colors slow and uncertain. "Word travels fast," he said without turning. "Spectre, huh?" She leaned against the railing. "They want me to join." "Of course they do," he chuckled. "You see what no one else does, makes people nervous." She smiled faintly. "You used to be one of them." He nodded. "Still am sometimes." For a while they just watched the horizon, the firing range silent for once. Finally he said, "You'll take it, won't you?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes traced the distant targets glinting under floodlights. "I don't know," she said. "Every time I pull that trigger, I wonder if I'm solving something or just postponing it." Briggs sipped his coffee. "That's the question that keeps good soldiers human." She looked at him, eyes softer now. "Do you ever stop hearing it?" "The echo," he smiled sadly. "No, you just learn to live in rhythm with it." The desert wind rose again, stirring dust along the line. Elena watched it dance, unpredictable, alive, untamed. She thought about the machines in the hangar, the algorithms trying to copy intuition, the colonels who wanted control. But wind can't be controlled. It can only be understood. That's what her uncle taught her. And maybe that's what she was meant to protect, the part of humanity that listens before it acts. Later that night, Elena walked to the abandoned firing line, the same one where she'd once stood as a cleaner, collecting casings while laughter filled the air. The targets had changed, the people had changed, but the sound of the wind was exactly the same. She crouched and picked up a single spent casing, rolling it between her fingers. The metal was cold now, lifeless, but it still carried memory. That morning years ago, her first impossible shot had started right here. Funny how legends always begin with something small. She placed the casing gently back on the ground. Then she whispered, "Don't let them turn you into a myth, Elena. Myths don't breathe." The moonlight caught her face, calm but shadowed, the reflection of someone who could hit a target across 2 miles, yet struggled to hit peace within herself. As she stood, the base speakers crackled with an announcement, call signs, rotations, names. Her name among them. Spectre orientation, 600 hours. She looked once more at the range, at the ghosts of who she used to be. Then she whispered to the empty air, "Guess the wind's changing again." And as she walked away, the desert stayed silent, but somehow it felt like it was listening. What happens when silence becomes your language? For Elena Cross, the morning began like 1,000 others: desert wind, metal decks, coffee that tasted like iron. But the patch stitched onto her sleeve was different now. No insignia, no name, just a gray mark that said everything by saying nothing. Spectre. The briefing room was dim, half-lit by a projector humming low. 5 operators sat in silence, faces shadowed, eyes focused. These were the people whose missions didn't exist on record: ghosts, some said. Precision incarnate. Now she was one of them. Captain Everett was there too. He gave her a small nod, quiet approval. "Welcome to Spectre, Cross. You've been recommended for Overwatch integration. I'll be your handler for this op." She took a seat. The table screen came alive, displaying a satellite feed of rugged terrain: mountains, fractured villages, river valleys like veins across the earth. "Operation Glass Veil," Everett began. "Objective: Overwatch reconnaissance of convoy movement suspected of supplying illegal weapons. You'll provide distance confirmation and Overwatch protection for Ground Recon Team 7. He zoomed in on a marked point, a high cliff, overlooking a long dirt road below. "You'll be our eye in the sky, but with a human pulse." She met his gaze. "Rules of engagement. Observe, confirm. Engage only if engagement saves lives." The phrase was surgical, clinical, a polished sentence crafted to hide what it really meant. "You'll decide who lives and who doesn't, alone." They left before dawn, the sky still purple with sleep. The aircraft hummed low through the clouds, cutting across the silence like a blade. Elena sat near the window, her gear packed tight: rifle, rangefinder, thermal pad, notebook. She watched the horizon change colors and felt her heartbeat align with the rhythm of flight. Everett sat across from her. "You ready?" She gave a small smile. Does anyone ever answer yes to that question honestly? He chuckled. "Good, stay that way." They landed miles from the nearest base. From there, Spectre moved on foot, quiet, precise, each step rehearsed and weighted. Elena carried her rifle slung tight, her movements measured, her senses absorbing everything: the shift of sand, the weight of air, the tone of wind. They reached the cliff at dusk. Below, a narrow road cut through the valley, winding between old stone outposts. The convoy was expected within the hour. Elena set up her rifle, bipod down, stock fitted, scope checked. Through the lens, the world narrowed to a tunnel of clarity. Every movement became geometry, every sound became distance, every breath became time. "Team 7, this is Overwatch Spectre 1, she whispered through comms. "Line of sight confirmed. Visual range 4 kilometers. Wind 2.6 meters per second west-northwest. Mirage stable." "Copy, Spectre 1, came the reply. "We're in position." The convoy appeared like a mirage, first as heat distortion, then as shapes. 3 trucks, 2 escorts. Nothing remarkable, nothing unusual except for the third truck. Its rear compartment was sealed. No markings, no insignia, just a faint thermal pulse inside. Elena's instincts tightened. She zoomed in. Third vehicle's running hotter than the rest. No external vents, might be shielding something. Everett's voice cut in. "Command says maintain visual. No action unless hostile intent confirmed." She didn't respond right away. Through her scope she saw movement, a hand gesture from the lead escort. Too practiced, too synchronized. Something was off. "Spectre 1, Team 7 called again. We're moving in for close scan." "Negative," Elena said quickly. "Something's wrong." But they didn't hear her in time. The static of comms swallowed her warning. Below, Team 7 emerged from the tree line, 3 soldiers, calm, cautious. And then chaos. A flash from the convoy. Then another. An explosion tore through the air, kicking dust and flame into the sky. Contact, contact, voices shouted through static. Elena's scope locked smoke, fire, disorientation. The convoy erupted into confusion, figures running, gunfire crackling through the valley like thunder. She exhaled once, slow, steady, and let training take over. Her reticle found a target, one of the ambushers on the ridge, distance 2,400 meters. Wind call left to right. Hold. Fire. Impact. Another silhouette emerged. Adjust, fire. Third one, repositioning. Adjust, fire. Her breathing never broke rhythm. She didn't think about the noise or the screams or the flame. She just followed the math. One breath, one shot, silence. Until suddenly, there were no more targets. Spectre 1, Everett's voice came through. Status. She swallowed hard. All hostiles down, Team 7 casualties. 2 down, he said quietly. 1 critical, you save the rest. Elena lowered her rifle. The silence after battle always felt too big, like the world holding its breath in grief. She didn't speak again for hours. When they returned to base, she went straight to debrief. Command praised her efficiency, her clarity, her precision. Words like extraordinary, calculated, and textbook floated through the room. They handed her a commendation she didn't ask for. And all she could think was, the math worked, but the men didn't make it home. After the debrief, Everett found her sitting outside under the floodlights, her rifle beside her, face blank. He sat next to her without speaking for a while. Then quietly, you did everything right. She shook her head. Then why does it feel wrong? Because you're human, he said, and humanity hurts. She looked at him, eyes tired, voice almost a whisper. If precision means losing that, I'd rather miss. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. That's what makes you dangerous, Cross. You see the line before others do. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moved across the range, cold and patient. Over the next weeks, Spectre ran more missions. Overwatch, recon, extraction support. Each time, Elena's performance was flawless. Her calls saved lives, her judgment unshakable. But each time she came home, she felt less like herself. The quiet between missions grew heavier, like the silence had teeth. One night, unable to sleep, she found herself back on the range, the same training ground where it had all begun. The same spot where she once stood with a broom in hand, invisible under the Nevada sun. Now she stood alone with a rifle that felt heavier than ever. She raised it slowly, sighted downrange. The target glowed faintly under moonlight, a steel plate 2 kilometers away. She exhaled, fired. The sound echoed clean and perfect. The round struck dead center. She didn't even look through the scope again. She just listened to the echo fade into the wind. A voice came from behind her. I knew I'd find you here, Everett said. She didn't turn. You ever wonder if we're fixing the world or just sharpening the tools that break it? He stepped closer, his tone soft. We don't get to fix it, we just keep it from falling apart. She lowered the rifle. That used to sound noble. He sighed, and now it just sounds tired. He studied her face, calm but fraying at the edges. You've been carrying too much alone. She smiled faintly. I'm good at it. I know, he said, that's the problem. The next morning she requested temporary reassignment, not discharge, not escape, just distance. Command hesitated, but Everett approved it quietly, understanding what others didn't, that sometimes you have to step away before the silence swallows you. Elena returned to Ravenwood for a few weeks, back to the desert, back to the training grounds that once tested her patience. It felt strange walking those same paths again, older now, burdened with ghosts. She found the same bucket she once used to collect casings, half rusted and buried under dust. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. It felt lighter now, or maybe she'd just grown stronger. A young recruit passing by stopped, eyes wide. "Are you Sergeant Cross?" Elena looked up, caught off guard. "I am." He hesitated, then smiled shyly. "They told us about you, the shot at Iron Vale Ridge. I'm training for sniper qualification next month." She studied him, nervous, eager, full of belief. "Then don't train to shoot," she said softly. "Train to understand." He frowned. "Understand what?" "The wind," she said, setting the bucket down. "The world, yourself. The rifle's just a mirror, it reflects what you are when you pull the trigger." He nodded slowly, the words settling deeper than he realized. "Thank you, ma'am." After he left, Elena stood for a long time watching the sunlight ripple across the range. It felt like closure, not the end of a story, but a pause between pages. Because somewhere deep inside, she knew her journey wasn't about distance or precision anymore. It was about perspective. About learning that sometimes the hardest shot to take is the one you choose not to. And as the wind swept across the desert, carrying the faint echo of her long-forgotten shot, Elena Cross finally understood what her uncle meant all those years ago. The bullet listens to physics, but the heart listens to truth. When you've seen too far, it's hard to unsee the truth. Elena Cross had spent months back at Ravenwood, mentoring, recalibrating, and pretending peace could be routine. Every morning she walked the firing line, teaching recruits how to breathe, how to see, how to wait. They admired her for her patience, not knowing that every moment of calm came at a cost she couldn't explain. Some called her a legend. She called herself recovering. But legends don't rest for long. One evening, as the horizon turned copper and the wind quieted, she was summoned to command. The same office, the same Colonel Price waiting behind the same desk. But this time his eyes carried something else. Not curiosity, not pride. Concern. "Sit down, Elena," he said. She did, folding her hands quietly. "Is this about my reassignment?" He shook his head. "No, this is about Spectre." Her chest tightened slightly. She hadn't heard that name in weeks. "They requested you," Price continued. "Specifically, Operation Nightingale, classified deployment, minimal footprint." Elena studied him carefully. "Why me?" "Because they trust your judgment," he said. Then, after a pause, "and because they need someone who won't follow orders blindly." The last part didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like warning. Hours later, she was back in the gray aircraft, no insignia, no light, just hum and motion. Captain Everett sat across from her again, the desert wind memory flickering between them. He looked older, quieter. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said. "I tried to stay away," she replied softly. "Didn't work." He nodded once. "No one really leaves Spectre, not completely." He passed her a thin tablet. "Briefing, read it." The screen flickered to life. Grainy satellite images, coordinates, timestamps. A small rural settlement, mountains behind it, fields marked with thermal signatures. "Intelligence suggests the locations being used to store stolen military optics," Everett said. "But that's not the priority." She scrolled. Her eyes stopped on the second page, an image of a man, bearded, weathered, but with kind eyes, civilian clothes. "Dr. Wren Haddad," she read aloud. "Humanitarian engineer, worked with Allied forces 2 years ago." Everett's expression hardened. "He's gone off-grid, allegedly defected. Command suspects he's trading technology for protection. We're tasked with observation and containment." Elena's voice lowered. "Containment meaning what?" He didn't answer right away. "You'll have overwatch. Orders will come if necessary." She knew what that meant, if necessary, the phrase that lived between clarity and regret. They inserted at night, mountains shadowed against a thin moon. The air was cold and thin, every breath sharp as glass. Elena and Everett climbed the ridge in silence. the valley below glowing faintly with scattered fires from the village. Once set up, Elena unfolded her rifle with the precision of ritual, one piece at a time, soundless. Through the scope, she could see the small settlement clearly now. Families moving, a generator hum. No weapons, no guards. Just people. And in the center of it, through an open window, she saw him, Dr. Haddad, sitting at a wooden table surrounded by children, helping them fix a broken solar lamp. She frowned. He doesn't look like a defector. Everett's voice was calm but distant. We observe, we don't decide. She stayed quiet, but her instincts stirred uneasily. He wasn't hiding, he was rebuilding. Hours passed. Command fed data through the earpiece, thermal scans, drone feeds, pattern analysis. Nothing matched their intelligence report. No militia presence, no contraband, no signs of weapons. Elena finally broke the silence. Command, this is Spectre 1. Visuals negative for hostile indicators. Recommend abort and reassess intel. Static crackled back. Then a voice cold and certain. Negative, proceed to secondary phase. Target confirmed. Authorization pending. She looked at Everett sharply. Confirmed by who? We've got no verification. He didn't meet her eyes. Orders stand. Captain, she said, tone low, those aren't combatants, that's a village. He exhaled slowly, hand tightening around his comms mic. Cross, I know how it looks. How it looks, she cut in, they're civilians. The comms beeped again. Spectre 1, prepare overwatch strike, stand by for coordinates. Her heart dropped. The strike wasn't her rifle, it was air support. A remote drone was already en route. Command, cancel that run, she snapped. We don't have target verification. Negative, mission authorized, execute. She looked at Everett and saw it in his eyes. That quiet resignation of a man too used to obeying. No, she whispered, not this time. Elena, he said carefully, don't do this. She stared back through the scope. The window. The children. Dr. Haddad lifting one into his arms, smiling as the solar light flickered to life. The coordinates flashed in her feed. She could see the red laser grid from the drone tightening over the target area. Her breath caught. She didn't think, she just acted. Spectre 1 override, she said, fingers flying across her terminal, spoofing coordinates. Cross stop. But it was already done. She recoded the drone's target to an empty hillside a kilometer west. The strike hit moments later, a thunderclap across the valley, shaking the mountains. The shockwave rolled over them, echoing like guilt. Below, the village stayed untouched. Lights flickered. People ran out in confusion, unhurt, alive. Elena slumped back, breath trembling. Everett's voice was a whisper. You just disobeyed a direct order. She met his eyes, calm, steady. No, I followed the right one. They extracted in silence. By the time they reached the landing zone, the weight had settled, heavy, inevitable. Back at base, she was escorted directly to debrief. No words, no smiles, just procedure. 2 officers sat across from her, questions sharp, tone sharpener. Why did you alter the coordinates? Who authorized you to override the system? What makes you think your judgment supersedes command? She answered each quietly, because I saw the truth. And every time they wrote something down, not her words, just interpretations of them. At the end, one of the officers leaned back. You understand, Sergeant Cross, this is insubordination at the highest level. You compromised an active operation. I prevented a massacre, she said evenly. His eyes narrowed. Do you have proof? Yes, she said. The proof is that they're still alive. Silence, then a single reply, flat, official. You're dismissed. Hours later, Everett found her sitting outside again, same place, same silence. They'll bury it, he said quietly. The mission, the reports, maybe even you. She nodded. They can bury the paper, not the truth. He studied her face, torn between admiration and dread. "You realize what happens now, right?" "I do," she said, "and I'll live with it." For a long moment neither spoke. The desert wind carried sand through the air, soft, endless. Then Everett said, "I would have done the same." She looked at him, half smiling. "Then maybe there's still hope for us." The next morning, she was formally relieved of Spectre duty. No ceremony, no explanation, just a one-line order, reassignment pending review. Her clearance revoked, her badge confiscated. But she didn't fight it. She simply packed her bag, one careful motion at a time, and left without saying goodbye. That evening she walked the Ravenwood perimeter one last time. The wind hummed low, carrying traces of her past, the laughter from the range, the sharp command of Briggs' voice, the clink of brass in her hands. She reached the far edge of the range, the place where it all began. Iron Vale Ridge glowed faintly in the distance, the sun melting behind it. Her first impossible shot. She raised her binoculars, scanning the ridge. The old orange target was long gone, replaced by a new steel plate, bright and clean. But she could still see the mark in her mind, the crater she'd made years ago. The shot that changed everything. She whispered to the wind, it was never about the distance. The breeze answered softly, carrying dust across her boots, wrapping around her like an old friend. Sometimes legends aren't built from victories. They're built from the moments you choose to do what's right when no one's watching. Days later, an anonymous message appeared in her secure inbox. No sender, no header, just a line of text. Command reviewed Nightingale. Intel confirmed false. You saved them. E. She read it twice, then deleted it. Not because she didn't care, but because she didn't need proof anymore. That night she walked out under the open desert sky, rifle slung over her shoulder. Somewhere beyond the horizon, others would carry out orders without question. But for her, the war was no longer about enemies. It was about integrity. She looked up at the stars, quiet, endless, unjudging, and said to the night, "Sometimes the truest aim is restraint." And with that, Elena Cross, the woman once invisible, once legend, once accused, disappeared again into the silence she had always belonged to. Not defeated, not erased. Just free. How do legends end? Not with applause. Not with medals. Just silence and the quiet hope that someone was paying attention. Years passed after Operation Nightingale. The mission itself was erased from records, rewritten into something sterile and incomplete. Officially, there was no drone strike. No override. No woman who stood between the sky and a village of children. But unofficially, she lived on in the stories told between whispers. Among recruits, she was the one who saw further than the scope. Among instructors, she was a reminder that orders mean nothing without conscience. And among those who knew her, she was simply Elena Cross, the woman who did her duty by refusing to become what duty demanded. The desert didn't change much. It rarely does. Years later, the wind still cut across the Ravenwood range, carrying dust and memory in equal measure. New recruits came and went, bright-eyed, eager, chasing scores and validation. They spoke of long shots and distant kills, of legend and precision. But one of them, a young woman with steady hands and dark eyes, carried something different. Her name was Mia Torres, daughter of Corporal Nia Torres, the sniper who once trained beside Elena years ago. Mia had grown up hearing fragments of her mother's stories. A woman who could read the wind like a map. A cleaner who outshot soldiers. A legend who disappeared before anyone could thank her. And now she stood at the same range her mother once described, holding a rifle for the first time. The instructor barked commands. Wind 3 meters per second northwest. Target 1,000 meters. Take your shot. She exhaled, finger tightening on the trigger. The round cracked wide right, miss. Laughter rippled from the line behind her. But Mia didn't flinch. She reset, breath steady. The next shot landed closer, then closer still. By her fourth, she hit steel dead center. The instructor's brow lifted. Who taught you to shoot like that? She smiled faintly. Someone who never got credit for it. He frowned, not understanding. Your mother. She shook her head. No, someone she learned from. And somewhere, carried by the same wind that had once touched Elena's face, the desert seemed to nod. Meanwhile, far from Ravenwood, on the outskirts of Arizona, an old cabin sat quiet under a stretch of red rock. Inside, dust motes floated in golden sunlight, shelves lined with books and worn maps. And at the back, a small wooden desk cluttered with notes, ballistics charts, wind diagrams, old photographs. A woman sat there, silver now threading through her hair, posture still straight, eyes still sharp. Elena Cross. She lived simply, off-grid, far from noise, far from recognition. She didn't miss the world she left behind. But she still woke before dawn, brewed coffee on a small iron stove, and stepped outside with her notebook and telescope. The sky was her companion now, the wind her only conversation. Some mornings she'd still pull the trigger, not at targets, not at enemies, but at distance itself, testing herself. 7 seconds of flight, 2.5 miles of silence. And every time the echo came back, she'd smile softly, as if the world were whispering back, "You're still here." She didn't keep trophies, but she did keep the old brass casing from that first shot at Ravenwood, polished, weightless, worn smooth from her thumb. It sat on her desk, beside a faded commendation letter signed by Master Sergeant Cole Briggs. She never framed it. She just kept it where she could see it, a reminder that humility can outlast arrogance. Sometimes she'd receive visitors, young soldiers, journalists, idealists who had somehow found her through rumor or accident. They came looking for the legend, the cleaner who hit 4,000 meters. But they found someone else. One afternoon, a cadet arrived, barely 20, nervous, full of admiration. He introduced himself quickly, hands trembling. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to intrude. I just wanted to meet you, the sniper who changed how we're taught to think." Elena smiled kindly. "You mean how you're taught to see?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The instructors always say you taught them that the rifle isn't the weapon, the mind is." She poured 2 cups of coffee, gesturing for him to sit. "Then they've already learned the most important part." The cadet hesitated, then asked the question everyone eventually did. "Is it true, the 4,000-meter shot?" She looked out toward the open canyon, wind sweeping across the ridge like an old friend. "Yes," she said quietly, "but that's not the story you should remember." "Then what should I remember?" She turned back to him, her eyes soft but steady. "That skill is nothing without judgment, and judgment means knowing when not to pull the trigger." He didn't understand it fully, not yet. But years later, when he'd stand on his own range, his own rifle trembling under pressure, those words would come back to him like prayer. At night, when the wind fell silent, Elena would light a single lantern by the window and write in her old notebook, not reports, not logs, but reflections. Some nights she wrote to her Uncle Victor, though he'd been gone for years. Other nights to no one at all. One entry read, "The world remembers the shot. I remember the stillness before it. That's where truth lives, in the space between control and choice." Another, "You can teach anyone to shoot straight, but you can't teach them to see clearly. That part they have to find in themselves." And at the end of one worn page, "Sometimes silence isn't peace, it's waiting." Seasons changed slowly in the desert. Years blurred together, quiet and golden. But one morning, as Elena stood outside, binoculars in hand, she caught sight of something across the ridge movement. Two figures climbing the trail toward her cabin, a man and a young woman. When they reached the porch, the woman smiled. "Ma'am, sorry to drop by unannounced. I'm Mia Torres." Elena blinked, the name unlocking something warm and distant. "Nia's daughter." She nodded. "Yes, ma'am. She always said if I ever wanted to learn what patience looks like, I should find you." Elena chuckled softly. "Sounds like Nia." Mia hesitated. "I joined the program, Advanced Marksmanship. They showed us your footage, well, what's left of it, the Ravenwood shot." Elena raised an eyebrow. "They still play that old thing." Mia smiled. "They don't show the hit, just the moment before, you adjusting the scope, steadying your breath. They say that's where everything changed." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind brushed past them, carrying the faint scent of desert sage. Then Elena said, "Come inside. Let's see if you can still read wind without looking at a flag." Mia grinned. "Without a device." Elena smiled. "Devices lie, air doesn't." Hours passed as they talked about mirage, distance, patience, and the fine line between skill and soul. Mia listened like someone hearing a story she'd waited her whole life to know. Before she left, she asked softly, "Do you ever miss it? The missions, the recognition?" Elena thought about it, the roar of aircraft, the static of comms, the rush of precision. Then she shook her head. "I miss the people," she said, "not the noise." Mia smiled. "Then maybe that's what I'll try to remember, too." As she walked away, Elena called after her, "Mia." She turned. "Don't aim to be remembered," Elena said gently. "Aim to be understood." That night, as dusk fell and the horizon burned gold, Elena sat on the porch with her coffee, staring at the stars. She could feel the weight of her years, not regret, not pain, but something quieter. Fulfillment, maybe, or the acceptance that some stories don't need endings. They just fade into memory and stay there, waiting to be rediscovered. She whispered to the dark, "Uncle, you were right. The bullet listens to physics, but the heart listens to truth." A small breeze brushed her face, soft, approving, timeless. She closed her eyes and let it pass. And somewhere across the desert, on the firing line at Ravenwood, a young sniper steadied her breath, feeling that same wind, unaware that it carried the ghost of the woman who'd once changed everything. Her shot rang out sharp, clean, hopeful. Not to prove herself, just to feel the rhythm. In the end, Elena Cross didn't vanish into history. She became something quieter, a presence felt but never seen, a moral echo that whispered through generations of soldiers and dreamers. Her name faded from files, but her lesson lived on. That true precision isn't about distance, it's about conscience. That power means nothing without restraint. And that sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. As the wind rolled over the endless horizon, carrying echoes of brass and memory, it was hard to tell where the story ended, or if it ever really did. Because some legends don't die. They just become the silence that guides those who follow.